My name is Malakai, I'm 13 years old, and my big dream is to be a singer.
But whatever is pouring out of you was so heavenly and beautiful, I actually went into a trance.
The moment 13-year-old Malakai Bayoh opened his mouth at the London Palladium in April 2023, the room completely changed. His Jesu performance hit so hard that, according to the official Britain's Got Talent audition clip, even Bruno Tonioli was visibly emotional before Simon Cowell slammed the golden buzzer and called it a dream voice. Millions saw triumph. What they didn't see was the grief closing in behind the curtain. What drove him to turn private mourning into a public masterpiece? Golden voice masks, brewing storm. Confetti was still falling when Simon Cowell leaned across the judge's desk and told 13-year-old Malakai Bayoh he had one of the best voices he'd ever heard. You can actually hear the audience lose control in the official Britain's Got Talent audition footage. People aren't just clapping. They're standing before the song is even finished, staring at this quiet schoolboy in a white suit singing Jesu like somebody 3 times his age. And here's the strange part. Malakai barely moved. No reality show theatrics. No oversized confidence. He looked almost shy, while the entire room around him melted down. According to the official clip uploaded after the audition aired in April 2023, Bruno Tonioli was visibly emotional before Simon even reached for the golden buzzer. That moment exploded online almost instantly. According to an interview with Southwark News, the performance crossed 8.6 million YouTube views in a matter of months. And even Alicia Dixon admitted his voice put her into a trance. But Malakai's reaction afterwards tells you a lot about the kid beneath the headlines. He reportedly pocketed pieces of the gold confetti like souvenirs, almost like a normal teenager trying to prove this insane thing had actually happened. Because underneath all the opera headlines and viral clips, there was still a regular boy somewhere in there. At least, that's the image people saw. A humble choir kid from Kennington, raised in a Sierra Leonean family, attending Cardinal Vaughan Memorial School, and singing with the famous Schola Cantorum Choir under music director Scott Price. Clean-cut, disciplined, soft-spoken. The kind of story talent shows an absolute love for selling, because it feels pure. But wait, here's where it gets more complicated. According to Primal Information's profile on Malakai, and comments his mother Magdalene shared publicly, this path didn't begin with some magical, random discovery. It began with a push, a very deliberate one. When Malakai was around 7 years old, his mom heard him singing a Lucas Graham song around the house and immediately decided he needed proper training. According to her account, he actually wanted to attend a birthday party the same day as a choir audition at St. George's Cathedral Choir in London. She overruled him and took him to the audition anyway. And honestly, think about that for a second. That single decision changed everything. No audition, no cathedral choir, maybe no opera training. No opera training, maybe no golden buzzer. One afternoon, where a mother ignored what her son wanted and chose what she believed he needed instead. That tension sits quietly underneath almost every prodigy story, doesn't it? At what point does guidance become pressure? And when adults see extraordinary talent in a child, do they protect the child first or the gift first? Malakai's rise after that choir audition was incredibly fast. By 2022, before most mainstream viewers had even heard his name, he was already performing at the Royal Opera House in a production of Alcina, playing the role of Oberto alongside established opera professionals. According to reports highlighted by entertainment profiles and theater coverage, critics from the Daily Telegraph described him as a star in the making. And this wasn't some school talent show anymore. This was elite classical performance territory, the kind that demands brutal discipline from adults, let alone a kid barely into his teens. At the exact same time, another version of Malakai was spreading online, the softer, more accessible version. The Christmas duet with Aled Jones that reportedly pulled in more than 25 million views across platforms. According to entertainment reports surrounding those performances, even Viola Davis shared clips of him singing. Imagine being that young and suddenly your voice is circulating through celebrity circles across the world while you're still worrying about homework and school uniforms. And the schedule around him just kept growing. Choir rehearsals, television appearances, opera coaching, school commitments, cathedral performances. According to reports tied to the Schola Cantorum and Southwark performances, Malakai was involved in major classical showcases around London, including Mozart and Handel productions performed in prestigious venues like the Royal Albert Hall during 2023. That kind of environment can sharpen talent at terrifying speed, but it also quietly removes the margin for being an ordinary kid. And here's the thing nobody says out loud during those glowing TV montages. Child prodigies are often treated like evidence of perfect parenting, while the emotional cost gets ignored completely. The camera focuses on the miracle. They rarely focus on the exhaustion sitting beside it. You can even sense it in Malakai's audition. Watch his mother in the wings during the performance. Proud, emotional, relieved, but also intensely invested. This wasn't just a fun family moment anymore. Years of training, sacrifice, commuting, choir discipline, and public expectation were standing on that stage with him. By April 2023, the Bayoh family had already built their entire rhythm around this extraordinary voice, which makes what happened later hit even harder. Because while Britain saw a fairy tale rise unfolding in real time, the foundations underneath that rise were already carrying enormous emotional weight. Fame was accelerating. Expectations were multiplying. Millions of strangers suddenly felt ownership over this boy's future. And somewhere behind all the applause and headlines sat a family trying to hold itself together as private pain crept closer. The semifinals would make Malakai look unstoppable. That's the version television sold. But only weeks before the finale, something happened that completely changed the emotional center of his story. And suddenly, every note he sang carried a grief audiences didn't fully understand yet. Grandma's sudden exit reshapes the finale. 3 or 4 days before the biggest performance of his life, Malakai Bayoh was reportedly dealing with the death of his grandmother, not months earlier, not some time during childhood that gets folded neatly into a television backstory. Days. According to reporting from Scorpio, like you covering the aftermath of Britain's Got Talent finale, the loss hit right before he walked onto that stage for the final performance that millions would watch as pure triumph. And suddenly, the finale looks completely different when you know that. Because audiences watching at home saw a composed 13-year-old in formal wear delivering Caruso with terrifying control beside the Schola Cantorum choir from Cardinal Vaughan Memorial School. They saw confidence, precision, another breathtaking moment from Britain's newest opera prodigy. But behind that polished television image sat a kid carrying fresh grief so recent it probably still felt unreal. You know that numb stage after a death, where your body keeps moving before your mind catches up. Imagine trying to sing Luciano Pavarotti's Territory through that. The strange thing is, some online retellings later mixed up the song and claimed he sang Nessun Dorma in the finale. He didn't. The official performance uploaded after the show confirms it was Caruso, that massive emotional ballad built on longing, heartbreak, and memory, which honestly makes the entire moment feel even heavier in hindsight. Because Caruso isn't a technical flex song, it aches, and Malakai sang it just days after losing one of the people closest to him. Here's where the timeline gets especially brutal. Before the finale even arrived, his semi-final performance of O Mio Babino Caro had already convinced many viewers he might actually win the whole competition. The momentum around him was enormous. Newspapers were covering him. Clips were exploding online again. Teachers and classmates from Cardinal Vaughan were rallying behind him publicly. According to coverage from the school itself, the support flooding in after each appearance became overwhelming in the best possible way. Then real life crashed through the middle of the television fantasy. That's the uncomfortable thing about talent shows that people rarely acknowledge. The production schedule keeps moving no matter what happens off stage. Cameras still roll, makeup still gets done. Rehearsals still start on time. Personal tragedy doesn't pause the machine. If anything, it gets swallowed by it. And yet Malakai walked back onto that stage anyway. Watch the finale clip carefully, and you'll notice something interesting. He doesn't perform like someone chasing applause. There's a stillness to him again, almost identical to the audition, except deeper this time. Less innocence, more emotional weight sitting underneath the notes. According to coverage from Cardinal Vaughan Memorial School, after the broadcast, even Bruno Tonioli appeared overwhelmed, describing Malakai as a gift from God. That reaction wasn't just about technique anymore.
You'll be singing in front of a huge audience and with conductor Raphael Pisha. Your performances moved the judges to tears, deservedly. Bruno described your voice as a gift from God.
People were responding to something emotionally raw. They probably couldn't even fully explain. And think about the pressure wrapped around that performance for a second. Millions watching live television, expectations after the golden buzzer. The responsibility of representing his choir, his school, his family, his Sierra Leonean roots, and now quietly carrying grief at the exact same time. Adults crack under less pressure than that. Fully grown professionals with decades of experience struggle to perform after a major family loss. Malakai was 13. That detail matters because audiences sometimes romanticize gifted children as emotionally stronger than they really are. We hear the mature voice and assume the inner world must also be mature. But grief doesn't care how talented somebody is. It doesn't care if you've sung at the Royal Opera House or gone viral online or shared stages with famous singers. A child still processes loss like a child, even if the child happens to sound like a world-class tenor. And maybe that's why the finale performance hits so differently. According to the Scorpio, Like You report, people close to the story described the performance almost like a quiet dedication, even though Malakai himself wasn't turning the show into a public grief announcement. That restraint actually makes it more heartbreaking. No dramatic speech, no montage package about loss. Just a boy singing through pain that most viewers didn't even know existed yet. There's also something haunting about the confetti detail coming back here. Remember how, after the audition, he reportedly picked pieces of golden buzzer confetti off the floor and kept them like treasures?
You auditioned for Britain's Got Talent and won Simon Cowell's Golden Buzzer. How was that moment for you?
That was like, all of it was just like really like, I didn't expect it to happen, so it was all just like, I was really happy.
Months later, those symbols of triumph existed beside funeral grief inside the same year of his life. Childhood wonder and devastating loss colliding almost simultaneously. That emotional contradiction is probably the real story of Malakai Bayoh, not just the viral clips. And honestly, this is where the conversation around prodigies gets uncomfortable. Because people love the results of extraordinary discipline in children, but they rarely ask what emotional sacrifices happen behind the scenes. Choir culture at elite levels can be incredibly demanding. Constant rehearsals, public performance standards, adult expectations are placed onto very young shoulders. For some kids, it builds resilience. For others, it quietly creates pressure they don't fully know how to express. What pushed your own talent from something fun into something serious? Usually, there's a moment where the stakes suddenly change, where praise turns into expectation, and the thing you loved starts carrying responsibility too. For Malakai, that shift happened incredibly early. By the finale, he wasn't simply the shy boy from the audition anymore. He had become a national symbol of excellence almost overnight. Interviews, media attention, celebrity praise, endless online reactions. And in the middle of all that noise, his family was mourning. You can almost feel that tension in the staging of the final performance itself. The choir behind him, from Cardinal Vaughan, the dramatic orchestration, the giant television production surrounding a teenager trying to hold his composure together, note by note. According to Cardinal Vaughan's own coverage afterwards, the school community erupted with pride and support after the finale aired, celebrating not just his talent, but the dignity with which he carried himself throughout the competition. Still, he finished fourth. And weirdly, that might have protected him more than winning would have, because child stardom has a brutal history. The higher the rise, the harsher the expectations become afterwards, especially in Britain, where audiences can build someone into a national treasure 1 month and quietly move on the next. But Malakai's story didn't disappear after the finale because people sensed something deeper than television spectacle. The grief gave the performances emotional gravity that couldn't be manufactured by producers or judges. A voice like that doesn't come from nowhere. There was history underneath it. Migration, family sacrifice, church discipline, Sierra Leonean heritage carried into London cathedrals and opera halls. Could his strength come from generations, not just music school? Sierra Leonean roots forge a resilient treble. Long before Malakai Bayoh ever stood under the gold lights of Britain's Got Talent, his story had already crossed oceans. That's the part a lot of viral clips leave out. People saw the polished white suit, the cathedral-trained voice, the Royal Opera performances, and they instinctively filed him into this neat little category of British choir prodigy. End of story. But the deeper you dig into Malakai's background, the clearer it becomes that his rise was shaped by something much heavier than television fame. There's migration inside this story, cultural pressure, family duty, the kind of expectations immigrant parents sometimes carry silently because survival itself demanded excellence from them long before their children were born. According to profiles published by Qobuz and Primal Information, Malakai was born in Gravesend, Kent, around 2010 to Sierra Leonean parents before being raised in Kennington, South London. And honestly, that context changes everything. Because when people heard his mother described as pushy or bossy after the choir audition story became public, many interpreted it through a purely British lens, almost like stage parent behavior from talent show culture. But within a lot of West African immigrant households, especially families who sacrificed stability to rebuild life abroad, discipline around education, music, church, and achievement often carries an entirely different emotional meaning. Success isn't treated as self-expression first, it's treated as a responsibility. According to the Primal Information profile covering Malakai's early life, his mother, referred to publicly as Hawa or Magdalene in different reports and television mentions, pushed him into the St. George's Cathedral choir audition at age 7 after hearing him sing casually at home. She reportedly overruled his desire to attend a birthday party that day because she believed the opportunity mattered more. That moment keeps resurfacing because it says so much about the family dynamics surrounding his talent. To some people, it sounds controlling. To others, especially families from immigrant backgrounds, it sounds painfully familiar. Parents who relocate to other countries often become obsessed with spotting opportunity early because they know how quickly doors close. Music lessons, scholarship routes, choir schools, elite programs, those things can represent access, stability, prestige, even protection. And when a child shows unusual ability, the entire family can begin organizing around that gift almost immediately. Malakai's family appears to have done exactly that. And here's where it gets especially interesting. According to a heritage-focused article hosted through translator UG and other biographical profiles surrounding his background, Malakai's father, Kelfala Bayoh, is connected to the Mende ethnic group from Sierra Leone. That matters because Mende cultural traditions place enormous importance on elders, family honor, respect structures, and collective identity. In many West African communities, grandparents aren't just relatives hovering in the background of childhood memories. They often act as emotional anchors, oral historians, spiritual guides, disciplinarians, and protectors all at once. So when Malakai reportedly lost his grandmother just days before the finale, the emotional damage likely ran far deeper than audiences understood. This wasn't simply a sad family loss inserted into a TV narrative. Within many Sierra Leonean family structures, especially close-knit immigrant households preserving cultural ties abroad, the death of a grandmother can feel like losing part of the family's foundation itself. And suddenly, that finale performance starts carrying a completely different emotional weight. Because think about the layers pressing down on this kid simultaneously: British public expectations, elite choir discipline, viral fame, family sacrifice, cultural pride. Then grief enters the picture right at the peak of national exposure. That's an extraordinary emotional burden for anyone, never mind a teenager whose voice hadn't even fully matured yet. Another thing worth untangling here is the confusion around his heritage online. Some scattered social media posts and recycled entertainment blogs incorrectly labeled Malakai as Nigerian during the height of his fame. But the overwhelming consensus across biographical sources, interviews, and family references consistently points to Sierra Leonean roots, specifically through his parents' background and family heritage. And honestly, those distinctions matter more than people realize. West Africa gets flattened constantly online, as if every culture across the region is interchangeable. But Sierra Leone carries its own distinct historical scars and migration stories, especially for families who relocated to Britain after periods of civil conflict and economic instability back home. Many immigrant parents who arrived in the UK from Sierra Leone during the late 20th and early 21st century carried enormous pressure to create safer futures for their children. That pressure has a way of filtering down into parenting. You can almost hear it in the structure of Malakai's upbringing. Cathedral choir training, prestigious school environments, opera exposure at an incredibly young age, constant discipline, public composure. Those things don't happen accidentally. They usually come from families who believe deeply that talent should never be wasted. But wait, it gets even deeper than music. Choirs themselves hold special weight in many African immigrant Christian communities across Britain. They aren't just extracurricular activities. They become spaces where identity survives migration, language survives, spirituality survives, community survives. A child singing in church or cathedral settings often represents the family publicly, not just individually. That means Malakai's voice wasn't only his own anymore once people recognized how extraordinary it was. It became symbolic for his family, for his school, for Sierra Leonean pride, for immigrant aspiration, for Black excellence inside elite British classical spaces that historically weren't built with kids like him in mind. And you can actually see audiences reacting to that dimension subconsciously during his performances. There's this extra emotional intensity whenever viewers talk about him, almost like people sense they're witnessing more than raw talent. They're watching cultural barriers quietly break in real time. Remember, this was a boy from South London singing classical Italian repertoire on mainstream British television and making hardened entertainment judges cry. That's not normal. Even his calmness starts making more sense through that lens. In many immigrant households, especially deeply religious ones, children are taught very early how to present themselves respectfully in adult spaces. Confidence exists, but it's usually wrapped inside humility and composure. So while television audiences interpreted Malakai's quiet demeanor as innocence, part of it may also have been cultural conditioning around discipline, respect, and self-control. And honestly, that restraint probably made the grief even harder to detect publicly. Some kids collapse outwardly under pressure. Others learn to contain everything internally because they've grown up understanding that composure itself is expected. Watching Malakai perform through personal loss without turning the finale into a spectacle suddenly feels less mysterious when you understand the cultural environment shaping him. What cultural thread pulls hardest inside your own family? Almost everyone has something inherited that quietly shapes how they respond to pressure, grief, ambition, even success itself. Sometimes you don't notice it until life tests you publicly. For Malakai, those inherited expectations collided directly with fame. And fame changes immigrant family dynamics fast. Suddenly, the child becomes the visible face of years of sacrifice. Every interview matters. Every public appearance matters. Every mistake feels amplified because it no longer reflects only the individual. It reflects the family story surrounding them. That can build extraordinary resilience. It can also create extraordinary pressure. Which brings us back to the voice itself. People kept describing Malakai's singing as mature, haunting, spiritual, even otherworldly. But maybe part of what audiences were hearing wasn't simply technical excellence. Maybe they were hearing emotional inheritance layered underneath the music, church tradition, family discipline, migration struggle, reverence for elders, quiet responsibility carried too early. A voice shaped by more than training. Because here's the uncomfortable truth sitting underneath this entire story. For Malakai Bayoh, choir wasn't just a hobby that turned into fame. It became a cultural lifeline, connecting a Sierra Leonean family in Britain to identity, pride, structure, and hope. Which also meant that when grief struck, especially the loss of a grandmother figure, the emotional impact tore straight through the very foundation supporting that rise. And the cruel part is, the spotlight only grew brighter afterwards. Fourth place on Britain's Got Talent didn't slow public fascination with him down at all. If anything, it intensified the pressure around what came next. How long before a teenage treble's miracle notes become casualties of time? Post-buzz burnout looms for the prodigy. The strangest part of Malakai Bayoh finishing fourth on Britain's Got Talent was how it barely slowed his rise. Usually, these shows follow a brutal pattern. One viral week, a morning television appearance, then the public moves on to the next emotional obsession. But Malakai's trajectory after the 2023 finale actually accelerated. According to profiles from Qobuz and entertainment coverage following the show, he transitioned rapidly into recording work, major live performances, and a growing classical career that pushed far beyond talent show contestant status. Honestly, that should have been the fairy tale ending, except the pace of it all felt unsettling when you stepped back. Because remember where we left him, a grieving teenager who had just sung Caruso days after losing his grandmother, carrying national attention while still trying to survive ordinary adolescence. Most kids process grief privately, awkwardly, and slowly. Malakai processed it in front of millions while cameras zoomed in on his face, waiting for an emotional reaction. Then, the industry immediately wanted more. By 2024, his debut album Golden arrived through Universal Music Group and reportedly climbed to the top of the UK classical chart, turning him from a television phenomenon into a commercially viable young artist.
Hey, listen, first things first, congratulations on the album.
Thank you.
Are you happy with it?
Very happy. It was really fun to make.
You did it really quickly, didn't you?
Yeah.
What can people hear on it?
Think about how insane that timeline actually was. 1 year earlier, he was still mainly known as a disciplined choir boy from South London. Suddenly, there were recordings, interviews, and headline performances in major venues, with audiences treating him like the future of British classical crossover. And get this, the very thing making him famous was also temporary. Treble voices don't last forever. That was the haunting reality sitting underneath every child opera sensation. Biology always arrives eventually. Puberty changes the instrument completely. Some young singers transition successfully into adult careers, but others lose the exact vocal quality the public fell in love with and disappear almost overnight. Classical history is full of prodigies who burned brilliantly for a few years before their voices shifted and the spotlight moved elsewhere. So while audiences celebrated Malakai's rise, there was already an invisible countdown running. Every performance mattered more because no one fully knew how long that extraordinary treble would remain unchanged. You can almost feel the pressure that creates. Protect the voice, schedule appearances carefully, balance school with professional opportunities, and avoid overworking. Yet, at the same time, the industry wanted to capitalize on the moment before the voice matured. That tension was brutal for the adults managing young singers, never mind the children living inside it. According to post-finale reporting discussed by Scorpio Like You, Malakai's career momentum continued even while grief from his grandmother's death still lingered in the background. Honestly, that detail might be the first genuine warning sign in this story. Not because success itself is bad, but because grief plus fame plus adolescence can become emotionally dangerous when they collide too quickly. Child stardom already isolates people under normal circumstances. Add elite classical training, and the isolation deepens further. Rehearsals replace free time. Travel replaces ordinary routines. Adults dominate your environment, and every interaction starts revolving around the gift. At some point, people stop asking how you're doing and start asking what you're performing next. Even the praise becomes exhausting. "You're so special," or "you're gifted," sounds beautiful at first, but for young performers, those compliments can slowly trap them inside a version of themselves they become terrified of losing. Malakai's world after BGT became very adult, very fast. According to coverage tied to his ongoing performances through 2024 and 2025, he continued appearing at prestigious venues, including the Royal Albert Hall. That sounds glamorous, And parts of it absolutely are. But there was a darker side people don't talk about enough. The higher a child climbs publicly, the harder it becomes for them to fail safely. Ordinary teenagers get to experiment with identity privately, but prodigies often don't. Their public image hardens early. Audiences want consistency, and fans want emotional access. Suddenly, a young person started carrying the expectations of thousands of strangers before they'd even figured themselves out. You can actually hear hints of that pressure in some of Malakai's own softer interviews. According to reporting from Southwark News, despite the international attention, he still came across as remarkably grounded, focused on school life and choir structure rather than celebrity culture. Honestly, that grounding may be the thing protecting him most right now. History is not kind to child stars, especially the exceptionally talented ones. The entertainment world loves prodigies while they remain miraculous, but it struggles with allowing them to grow normally afterwards. Audiences unconsciously freeze them in time. They want the innocent version forever, the untouched version they first felt during the breakout performance. But human beings can't stay frozen. Voices deepen, personalities change, grief evolves, and ambition shifts. Somewhere inside all the applause, there was still just a teenager trying to navigate school, identity, family loss, and adulthood arriving faster than expected. Seen talent flame out too fast before? Usually, the collapse didn't begin with a scandal or disaster. It started quietly, with exhaustion and emotional withdrawal. That's why the grandmother's loss mattered so much. It wasn't simply tragic. It exposed the emotional fragility underneath the polished success narrative. For one brief moment, viewers glimpsed the reality behind the image. A boy carrying pain while still expected to sound angelic on command. And the industry kept moving anyway, which raises the bigger, more uncomfortable questions surrounding shows like Britain's Got Talent. Do these platforms create sustainable artists? Or do they compress years of emotional pressure into children before they're equipped to process it? The transformation from choir boy to national symbol happened terrifyingly fast for Malakai Bayoh. One viral audition, one golden buzzer, one grief-filled finale. Then suddenly, a recording career and a public waiting to see whether the magic continues. As of 2025, Malakai remains active and still carries one of the most remarkable young voices Britain has produced in years. But once you understand the grief underneath the rise, the entire journey feels different. The tears from the judges and the standing ovations start looking less like uncomplicated triumph and more like snapshots of a teenager balancing brilliance against emotional weight in real time. Honestly, that reshapes every cheer from the audience. Malakai Bayoh didn't just sing Caruso in the finale, he carried grief through it. A grandmother's loss, immigrant family pressure, prodigy expectations, all hidden beneath applause that most viewers thought was celebrating simple success. According to reports surrounding the finale aftermath, that heartbreak never fully left the story. Which Malakai performance hit you hardest, and how do you think he's holding up now?